My sister is a snake girl, and the blind man in the village, Chen, said that a snake girl can bear children. If someone marries her, they will have sons. When my parents heard this, their eyes lit up with the prospect of a great money-making opportunity. When my sister turned 18, they moved her to a small house next door. From then on, my sister's days of suffering began. Finally, one day, my sister couldn't bear the suffering anymore. Wearing red, she bit off 2 of my mother's fingers and jumped off a 10-meter cliff, ending her life. After my sister's death, everyone realized they had mistreated her. Chapter 1. My sister is my parents' 4th child. I am the eldest, and I originally had 2 younger sisters. After they were born and found to be girls, they were abandoned in the mountains by our grandmother. Grandma said, "One child to carry on the family name is enough. Having more is a waste of food." So, when my 4th sister was born, Grandma also abandoned her in the mountains. Strangely, my sister cried for 3 days and nights in the mountains without dying. Curious as to why she didn't die, my mother went to see and found my sister lying in a snake nest. The nest was full of colorful poisonous snakes, but they didn't harm my sister. The blind man in the village said, "These are snakes that have acknowledged her as their master. This girl is a snake woman, also a blessed woman. Take her back and raise her well. I guarantee the next child born will be a son." My mother was delighted to hear this. She immediately brought my sister back from the snake nest. When my sister was 1 year old, my mother became pregnant again. This time, she really gave birth to a son. My mother happily hugged my sister and kissed her affectionately. She called her darling. Chapter 2. Watching my sister being so loved by my mother, I couldn't help but feel a tinge of bitterness. But knowing that my sister wouldn't be scolded or hit like I was happy for her. I thought my sister's days would continue to be this good. However, when she was 10 years old, my mother met a master while out and about. The master told my mother that my sister was a blessed woman recognized by the snakes. Any man who spends time with her can make his woman bear sons. Anyone who marries my sister will be truly blessed. Excited, my mother returned home and shared this news with my grandparents and my father. Thinking about lifting my sister's dowry high. Upon hearing this, my grandmother's eyes rolled around, saying, "It's crazy to marry off such a blessed girl. It's better to keep her at home and make money for ourselves." At that time, I was young and didn't understand what my grandmother meant. It wasn't until my sister turned 18 that I understood why they were all smiling strangely when they gathered together. Chapter 4. When my sister turned 18, my mother moved her to the small house next door. The reputation of the blessed girl, after years of effort from my parents, spread far and wide. The wealthiest man in the neighboring town, Chen Daquan, brought a sack of money on the first day my sister was moved to the small house. He wanted to be the first to test the authenticity of this blessed girl. I knew this man, he was very ugly. Ugly like a flower snake shedding its skin. His rough skin covered with white patches, enough to give anyone goosebumps. But what he was most famous for wasn't his extreme ugliness. It was his ability to make money. For some reason, he had been incredibly successful these past few years. Earning money hand over fist. Unfortunately, despite his money-making abilities, he had countless wives but couldn't father a son. So, upon hearing about my sister's reputation, he came with a sack of money. My parents, grandparents, and everyone present were almost blinded by the sight of so much money. They quickly ushered him into my sister's room. Chapter 5. My sister was too pitiful. I could hear her screams of suffering from the small room. I wanted to run out to protect her, but my hair was firmly grasped by my man. He held onto my hair and slammed my head against the wall. "You little bitch, what are you worth? Do you still want to go save her? You can't even save yourself. If you don't give birth to a son for me this year, I'll take the money I earned from selling pigs to go find your sister. Ha ha ha. The man's shameless laughter came from behind me. My tears kept falling on the bed. Not just because of the pain, but also because of the heartache for my sister and myself. Why must a son be born? Is a daughter destined to die? Chapter 6. In the early morning, my sister's painful cries finally stopped. I limped over to my sister's room from the next door. Chen Daquan had already left. My sister lay on the bed, covered in bruises, not a single part of her body unharmed. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at her like this. Seeing me cry, she struggled to reach out her sore, weak hand and tried to wipe away my tears. Sis, don't cry. I'm not hurt. She tried to lift her swollen face from the beating and smiled comfortingly at me. My kind little sister, in such a state, was still trying to comfort me. I tightly held her hand. Sis, I'm saving up money, once I have enough, I'll take you away. I heard people in the big city don't favor boys over girls. Let's go to the big city together, we won't have to suffer like this anymore. Upon hearing this, my sister smiled hopefully. That sounds like a great place, sis. I'll wait for you to take me there. Chapter 7. I've been secretly saving up money. But it's not easy. My man is an ugly old bachelor. He is our neighbor. I remember since I was a child, his favorite thing to do was sit at the door and stare at the round buttocks of passing women. Later, his gaze turned towards me. His stare made me uncomfortable all over, like being entwined by a cold snake. I begged my parents not to marry me off to him. But my parents took the dowry of 10,000 yuan from the old bachelor. That night, they tied me to the old bachelor's house. The old bachelor loves to hit people and uses all sorts of dirty tricks on me. From initially resisting to later obeying. Because I knew, the result of not obeying would be even harsher beatings. And I need to save money. As long as I save enough for the fare to the big city, I'll take my sister with me. Chapter 8. I'm saving money slowly. Women here are not allowed to go out, and the only way to earn money is through our own men. The old bachelor keeps an eye on me. Apart from money for daily necessities, he won't give me a single extra cent. But that doesn't discourage me. I poured out some of the salt I bought in advance, and when it was used up, I would ask him for money. Sometimes I would inevitably get beaten when there was time, and be scolded as a spendthrift. But it was nothing to me. I've gotten used to it. As long as I can save up the money. Chapter 9. My sister's hard days continued. After Chen Daquan returned, he quickly got his woman pregnant. At 3 months, they checked the gender of the fetus. It turned out to be a boy. Now, my sister's reputation became even more prominent. From that day on, my sister's days became even harder. There were even people coming from far away by car. My sister's health deteriorated, while my parents' wallets swelled. My grandparents were so happy that their faces almost split from smiling every day. I couldn't wait to take my sister away. I was afraid that if we didn't leave soon, my sister would wither away like the wildflowers trampled by those rough men at the door. But my sister was too closely watched. She was the golden child of the family, and my parents wanted to keep an eye on her all the time. Luckily, the time came soon. Chapter 10. Ding dong. In the neighboring yard, there was a joyful sound of gongs and drums. Today is the day my brother is getting married. He found the most beautiful girl in the neighboring village. To marry her, my parents gave a dowry of 80,000. Over the years, my parents had earned a lot of money through my sister. Naturally, they wanted to celebrate their precious son's wedding in a grand manner. Outside, the drums were thunderous. My man got up in the morning, and beat and kicked my still flat belly for a while. Then he went next door to drink. Before leaving, he said to give me another month, and if I still didn't conceive, he would pay to sleep with my sister. I watched his departing figure, got up from the ground, and went to the kitchen. I pulled out a tattered cloth bag from under the stove. Inside were the savings I had accumulated. Mostly 1 cent and 5-cent bills, totaling 562 yuan. I had inquired, and this money was just enough to buy 2 tickets to the big city. I looked at the sky outside, quietly waiting for the right moment. Chapter 11. You filthy creature, the in-laws are coming today, you must not come out and bring bad luck to us. Good, hide in the house. Grandma said disdainfully to my sister inside the house. I couldn't help but laugh at such a grandma. They made money off my sister, used her hard-earned money to renovate the small Western-style building, buy a car, and even helped my brother marry the girl he liked. And now they still find her dirty. These people are truly shameless. Grandma instructed me to watch over my sister, not allowing her to go out and offend others' eyes. I lowered my head and obediently agreed. Suddenly, the sound of gongs, drums, and firecrackers in the yard became even more lively. I knew the bride had arrived. The opportunity for my sister and me had also come. Chapter 12. My sister and I ran frantically hand in hand through the woods. We knew that once we passed through this forest, we would reach the main road. On the main road, we could go to the town. In the town, we could buy tickets to leave this place and go to the big city. We ran desperately, heading towards freedom. Bang! A stick hitting my head shattered the beautiful illusion my sister and I had. Sister? I turned my head with difficulty and saw that the one hitting me was the old bachelor. Behind him were the strongest men in the village, along with my family. You little wretch, I've been watching you sneak around every day. So you've been planning to take your sister and run away. The old bachelor struck my head again. Your sister is the medicine for me to have a son. If you dare to take her away, I won't kill you. Mother-in-law, I caught the person for you, you should at least let me have a free go with the lucky girl. The stick kept falling on my head. My sister held me, screaming her heart out. I wanted to tell her I was okay, but the increasingly heavy blows on my head made it impossible for me to speak. My parents rushed over to take my sister and go back. No. I'm not going back, I don't want to help you with those dirty things anymore. You bunch of heartless crooks, why should I earn dirty money for you? You will face retribution. Upon hearing this, my mother anxiously reached out to cover my sister's mouth. My sister bit her hand with all her might, biting off 2 of her fingers. In the woods, my mother's screams echoed. Taking advantage of the chaos, my sister broke free from my parents' grasp and ran frantically ahead. Then, resolutely, she jumped off the cliff. Chapter 13. By the time they found my sister, she had already passed away. When they carried her back, the frail figure was wrapped in a tattered mat. Upon hearing the commotion, my mother emerged from the house, holding her injured hand. She glared bitterly at my sister's body, spat twice on the mat, and then blamed my father. Why did you bring back this bad omen? Disturbing the happy event, see if you regret it later. My father scratched his head, annoyed. What do we do if we don't bring her back? My mother huffed. Of course, wrap her in the mat and throw her into the back mountain for a makeshift burial. We can't let this filth defile our ancestors' graves. Listening to this sent a chill down my spine. Did my sister voluntarily engage in those dirty deeds? It was all because of them. How dare they look down on her? My father agreed with my mother and was about to command someone to throw my sister into the back mountain. But then my grandmother also came out, saying, yes, throw her into the snake's den for a makeshift burial, let her never reincarnate, she's the reason we lost our source of income. My mother, looking at her severed finger, bitterly said, yes, throw her into the snake's den, let her never reincarnate. Boom! Unspeakable hatred surged in my mind. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing with these so-called family members. How could they treat my sister this way? She was their flesh and blood. They didn't treat her well in life, and now they were disrespecting her in death. Not letting her reincarnate. Damn it! These people deserve to die. I desperately crawled towards my sister's body, trying to protect her. But the old bachelor who had been watching me all along kicked me aside. Then he went to assist my parents. Chapter 14. My father called a few people and threw my sister into the makeshift burial site in the back mountain. Before my sister was carried away, I saw tears of blood streaming from her eyes. But my father and the others seemed not to notice. I opened my mouth, wanting to tell them. But in the end, I lowered my head and said nothing. Chapter 15. I was beaten severely by the old bachelor. My arms and legs couldn't move. At night, he found me too noisy and cursed me with bad luck, then climbed out of bed to sleep in the outside room. I knew he was afraid that my groans of pain would disturb him. Strangely enough, that night I slept very soundly. When I woke up, I found out that our village had been attacked by thousands of colorful snakes the night before. Not only were all the livestock in the village devoured overnight. A few unlucky fellows were bitten to death by the venomous snakes. Interestingly, the old bachelor was one of those unlucky fellows. When I found him, 2 snakes were crawling out of his nose. The snakes didn't bite me when they saw me, they just turned around me once. Then they left. I looked at the stiff body of the old bachelor and let out a cold laugh. Here it comes. She finally came back. The body shed tears of blood, a sign of overwhelming resentment. This is just the beginning, those who insulted her. She won't let a single one of them go. Chapter 16. I was laughing happily when cries came from the neighboring yard. I listened carefully, it turned out that my grandmother had also been bitten to death by snakes. This time, I burst out laughing. So happy. That old witch is dead too. Ha ha? Ha ha ha. What a double delight today. Chapter 17. Unfortunately, not everyone was as happy as I was. The events in the village frightened everyone. They all ran to Blind Chin's house, asking if he had any solutions. After listening to everyone's account, Blind Chin stared with his cloudy eyes, incredulously saying, "You beasts, how could you do such things? Hey, even when people die, you don't let go. I can't save such beasts. You all just wait for the vengeful snake woman to retaliate." After speaking, he looked in the direction of my parents and said, "The snake woman holds grudges the most. The first to deal with will be the one who treated her the worst in her lifetime. Last night was just a warm-up, the next ones to face it will be you." After hearing Blind Chin's words, my parents' legs turned weak. They kept shouting for Uncle Chin to save them. But he refused to say another word. Helpless, my parents had to persuade the village chief to intervene. The village chief rubbed his hands in front of my parents, and they understood. Immediately, they handed over 100,000 and gave it to the village chief. He took the money and left for town. In the afternoon, he returned with a strange old woman. The old lady had a sharp chin, fish-like bulging eyes that sent chills down one's spine. She carried a worn-out large bag, and as soon as she entered, she demanded meat from my mother. My mother dared not refuse and quickly instructed me to help slaughter a chicken and prepare the meat. Chapter 18. After the old lady ate and drank her fill, it was almost dark. My parents were nervous wrecks, but the old woman sat relaxed on a chair, picking her teeth with a chopstick. When my parents couldn't bear the tension anymore, she said to them, "Take me to see where the girl's grave is." My parents exchanged a glance, full of embarrassment in their eyes. Finally, my father nervously said, "There's no grave. We tossed the body into a mass grave." Unlike Blind Chin's reaction, the old lady didn't seem surprised to hear this. Instead, she displayed an understanding expression. Then, with a sinister smile, she said, "No wonder the resentment is so high, thrown into a mass grave and a snake's nest, adding fuel to the fire, how interesting. All right, I'll handle this." Chapter 19. The old lady took my parents to the mass grave, saying she wanted to set up some kind of formation. When they returned, it was already late into the night. I lay in my own bedroom next door, hearing the commotion from the other side, knowing they had returned. I wanted to see what they had done. But my body was too heavy to get up. My wounds hadn't fully healed. I was helping my mother with cooking and washing dishes in the afternoon, causing excruciating pain in my wounds. I decided to find out the next day. I fell into a deep, heavy sleep. But just as I drifted off, I was abruptly awakened by a loud knocking on the door. I struggled to get up and go to open the door. After opening it, I saw my parents standing there, looking at me with a strange smile on their faces. My mother spoke first. "Xiaodi, you heard what Blind Chin said during the day, your sister will definitely come to seek revenge on us tonight." I blinked. But, didn't that old lady just go to set up some kind of formation? My mother said, "The formation will only take effect tomorrow, tonight is still very dangerous. Xiaodi, your father and I are scared. We want you to come sleep with us, keep us company, boost our courage. Xiaodi, you've always been obedient, you surely won't refuse us, will you?" Seeing the calculating look in my parents' eyes, I hurriedly shook my head. Seeing my reaction, my father exchanged a glance with my mother, then they came over, supported me, and started walking towards the next room. Being severely injured, I was no match for them. They dragged me as if I were a dead dog. "Xiaodi, your life was given to you by your parents, now it's time for you to repay it. You will surely help us, right?" I said no with my mouth, but they didn't care about my refusal. They grabbed my arm and took me to the next room. Then, they tied me up tightly on their bed. The strange old woman surrounded the bed with soil, saying it was soil retrieved from a mass grave, guiding my sister. She also sprinkled some on my body. Finally, she made my parents cut their fingers, dripping blood on me. It wasn't until the warm blood dripped on me that I realized, terrified, what they were planning to do. They wanted to make me a scapegoat. They wanted me to be their substitute, to let my sister kill me to appease her resentment. I tried to scream, but the old woman tightly covered my mouth. "You little brat, don't mess things up for us later. A useless girl, being able to shield your own parents from disaster is already a good deed. What's there to be aggrieved about?" My mother chimed in cheerfully. "Exactly, if your sister comes looking for you tonight, you can't come looking for us again. Xiaodi, go downstairs and have a good talk with your sister. We are her parents, her life was given by us, how to handle it is our right, no revenge allowed." I stared at the two standing in front of me, looking so self-righteous. I wished I could turn into a vengeful ghost and bite them to death. So hateful. So full of hate. Chapter 20. After the substitute formation was set up, they each went back to their rooms to sleep. I stared at the dark ceiling, too scared to sleep. It sounded like the wind was blowing against the windows. It was like a wild cat scratching at the windows. In the middle of the night, I heard the rain outside. Pitter-patter. Creak. Suddenly, the window was blown open by the wind. The fierce wind outside rudely blew into the room. I shuddered from the sudden gust. Then, a pair of icy hands touched my face, sending shivers down my spine. Even my throat made a gurgling sound. Those hands kept touching me, as if outlining my figure. She touched my eyes, then my nose, mouth, and finally stopped at my neck. And then tightened suddenly. I don't know what kind of sensation that was. Like cold snake skin, tightly strangling me. I was going to die. But I was so unwilling. A tear rolled down from the corner of my eye, dropping onto those cold, snake-like hands. No. I heard a sharp, desperate scream in my ear. Then the hands that were tightly binding me were suddenly released. It's not Dad. Nor Mom. They lied to me. Lied to me. It was pitch black outside, but I could see my sister's face clearly. Tears of blood kept flowing from her eyes. She suddenly stopped screaming. Her icy hand reached out and touched my face again. It turns out to be my sister. My sister's voice softened. Her icy hand removed what was covering my mouth and then wiped away my tears. Don't cry, sister. I won't hurt you. They actually wanted to harm me and kill the person I love the most. Well, then I'll go kill the people they love the most first. After saying that, my sister smiled eerily in the darkness, making her blood tear-streaked face even more terrifying. And then, she disappeared. Chapter 21. Later, I fell into a drowsy sleep. The next morning, I was awakened by the woman's mournful cries. And then came the heart-wrenching cries of my parents. After listening for a while, I understood. So that's what my sister meant last night. She indeed killed the person my parents loved the most. Their beloved son. Chapter 22. My parents cried outside for a long time. Then they burst in angrily. Seeing that I was still alive, they hesitated for a second, then directed their intense hatred towards my scarred body. My mother grabbed my face and viciously hit me countless times. Why isn't it you who died? You worthless thing, you should have died last night. My father kicked my softest belly frantically. You wretched girl, you should have died. I'll make you pay with your life for my son. Just when I thought I was going to be beaten to death, the old lady walked in. If you kill her, you'll be beyond redemption. The snake woman holds grudges, today it's your beloved son, tomorrow it'll be you. She looked towards the chaotic burial direction and said, after you die, everyone else is next. She's just not powerful enough now, but by the 7th day after death, no one in this village can escape. Pausing for a moment, she looked at me with grim eyes. The snake woman's vengeance knows no bounds, consumed by rage, she kills on sight. Zeodi, you also don't want to die, right? Thinking back to last night, I instinctively nodded. The old lady saw my reaction and smiled smugly. If you don't want to die, then you have to do me a favor. Chapter 23. I didn't know where the village chief found this old lady. She seemed to have some real ability. She had my parents call all the men in the village to come together to deal with my sister's body. When the men in the village heard my parents say that the snake woman's revenge would kill everyone in the village who had harmed her, not a single one dared not to come and help. My sister's body was placed in a large red coffin by the old lady. The burial site was chosen under 2 old willow trees. Around it, 49 soul-restraining nails were inserted. Finally, 3 copper coins were placed on the coffin. She explained that this trapped evil spirits and kept them forever trapped in this coffin without reincarnating. After speaking, she smiled smugly, causing the villagers who came to help to burst into laughter. Finally, she walked towards me. Zeodi, now go and drop a drop of blood on your sister's forehead. You are the person she cares most about, your blood can calm her soul. If she lives here peacefully, she won't come out to harm others. After the 7th night, she won't have the strength to come out anymore. After the old lady finished speaking, she grabbed my arm tightly with hands like old tree bark. Half threatening and half coaxing me, she said, gently drop the blood on it, and when you drop the blood, remember to say these words. You say you hope your sister will stay here peacefully and not wander around. As long as you obediently do these things, I won't let your parents beat you again. Otherwise, I'll have them sell you to the deeper mountains. Hee hee, but it's also possible that before they sell you, the vengeful ghost your sister turned into, the snake woman, might kill you first. Upon hearing this, I shuddered. Deeper mountains. I don't want to go there. I heard it's too scary there. The poor old bachelors who can't afford a wife share one woman. Die? I definitely don't want that. I still have things to do, how can I die? Seeing my fearful look, the old lady, with her dried up gums, said, "It's good that you're scared, do as I say." I walked to my sister's coffin. I looked at the person in the coffin, strangely her body was preserved well despite the hot weather. The blood and tears on her face had been wiped away, revealing her originally clean little face. Still as beautiful as the little sister in my memory. But now, the owner of this little face will never open her eyes vividly and sweetly call me sister again. She has now become the snake woman. A terrifying evil spirit. I followed the old lady's instructions step by step, completing everything she told me to do. The old lady watched my actions and smiled with satisfaction. Then she directed everyone to seal the coffin. My sister was buried in this never rebirth formation. Chapter 24. Since that day. Indeed, there have been no more snakes in the village. Even the occasional rat snakes seen on the grapevines were nowhere to be found. Everyone praised the old lady as a fairy descended to earth. My parents treated this old lady as a savior, offering her fish and meat every day, letting her eat and live well. Chapter 25. My younger brother died. Fortunately, my younger brother's wife is still here. And she is pregnant. They conceived out of wedlock. If nothing goes wrong, she should be carrying a son. After all, some of the men who had been to my sister's room also had younger brothers. Because of this child, my parents did not collapse. They treated my younger sister like an ancestor. Time passed day by day. Everyone seemed to have forgotten about my sister. Except me. I lay in bed, looking at the moon outside, counting the days on my fingers. Today is finally the 7th day. I coughed a few times, put on my coat and walked out of the house. My frail body, having suffered so many injuries. Taking the medicine from the village quack wasn't good, I still coughed up blood at night. Every step I took, my lungs felt like they were about to explode. But even though my body ached, today, I must go out. My younger sister is coming back. How could I not welcome her? The sounds of drinking and playing dice came from next door. I knew it was the old lady having a good time. She loved to have people accompany her in drinking and playing dice. I walked over and saw half the village sitting in my parents' yard. Of course. My brother's coffin was still in the main hall. Everyone was there to keep vigil for him. Look at this treatment, this is how a son is treated. So ceremonious. Yet my sister was only wrapped in a straw mat, thrown into a chaotic burial. My mother saw me and narrowed her eyes dangerously. Thankfully, she didn't say anything in the end, just asked me to find a place to hide. Don't infect them with bad luck or illness. I obediently nodded. Then I found a secluded spot to hide. Chapter 26. The people at the feast were getting happier and happier. One person suddenly said, "Today is the 7th day for my sister, and still no snakes have appeared. It seems the fairy truly descended to earth." The old lady, being praised like this, laughed heartily, showing her yellow teeth. The atmosphere in the yard became even better. I watched the moon, counting the time. It's getting close. Midnight is approaching. Let them be happy for a while. I heard a faint rustling sound in my ears. I quickly looked towards the wall, but there was no sign of any snakes. Has it not come in yet? But if it hasn't come in, why is the rustling sound so loud? My younger brother's wife suddenly screamed. Then came my mother's shout. Oh my God, your water broke, it's only been a few days. Quick, get a midwife. Apparently, the midwife was no longer needed. A round, chubby thing fell from between my sister's legs. Then someone screamed. It's snakes, snake eggs. With that scream, numerous baby snakes crawled out of those eggs. These snakes were colorful, with triangular flat heads, clearly venomous. People around realized the danger and tried to run. But it wasn't that easy. Even though these snakes had just hatched, they were quite agile. They lunged at the people around them. What terrified them even more was that their pregnant wives, no matter how many months along, were all giving birth at the same moment. Just like my sister, what came out of their bellies were snake eggs. Snakes kept hatching from the yard. They realized then that what their wives were carrying in their bellies wasn't sons at all. It was their sister's snake eggs. Chapter 27. One bite from a venomous snake took down a person. There were cries of despair all around. Even outside the yard. I suppose the women inside the house must have given birth at the same time. The so-called fairy old lady, walking with light steps, tried to go back into the house to find her magical tool. After searching around, she found nothing. Finally, she saw me standing at the other end of the yard. And the shabby bundle in my hands. It's you. She finally came to her senses. With a pair of dead fish eyes, she glared at me menacingly. You deceitful scoundrel, you tricked us. Why? Aren't you afraid of death? I shook the bundle in my hand, grinned, and said, of course, I am afraid. But as long as I think, when I die, I'll have you all to accompany me, I am not afraid at all. Let's go to hell together. Ugh! You dare, you wretched child. As she spoke, my mother, standing beside the old lady, lunged at me. I knew she intended to hit me as usual. But this time, I wouldn't just stand there and take it. I took 2 steps to the side. My mother, not paying attention, stumbled and fell into a pit of snakes. The venomous snakes mercilessly burrowed into her nose and towards her constantly cursing mouth. Then she was completely silent. When she died, her eyes looked in horror behind me. I turned around and indeed saw my sister dressed in funeral clothes. Tears of blood streaked down her face, just like the ones that fell from my eyes onto hers back then. Yes, I did this. How could I bear to let my dear sister never reincarnate? Her grudges have not been settled yet. How could I bear to let her suffer so much? In fact, I followed the old lady's instructions. Otherwise, I couldn't fool such a cunning old hag. But after that, I did one more thing, which was to use my blood to paint my sister's face with tears of blood again. Chen Blind Man told me. As long as there are tears of blood, my sister will be the most powerful vengeful snake woman. No array can stop her. Chapter 28. My dad saw my sister and his legs went weak. He collapsed to the ground. Ernie, Dad was wrong, I was wrong. It was all your mom and grandma's idea, blame them if you must. A strange smile crept onto my sister's lips. I will blame them. My dad's face lit up. Great, I knew you were my good Ernie. Before my dad could finish, his calf was bitten by a venomous snake. He stared at my sister in disbelief. Ernie, you said you wouldn't blame me, right? My sister laughed hysterically. Yeah, you're about to die, why would I blame you? Dad also died. Then it was one man after another who had been in her room. And those who insulted her as a worthless woman while sending their men and sons to my sister's women. And the worst of all, the old lady who wanted to prevent her from reincarnating. The old lady was nailed to death by my sister with 49 soul-calming nails. She had the most gruesome death. Soon, everyone in the yard was dead. My sister's gaze finally turned to me. I shrank back, then calmly closed my eyes. Living here is not easier than death. A pair of hands as cold as a snake touched my face. It felt just like that night. The old lady said that after my sister's spirit returned as the vengeful snake woman, she would kill anyone she met. She wouldn't spare my life just because I'm her sister. But I'm not afraid. She is my beloved sister. If I were to die by her hands, I would willingly do so. It's just that those hands did not come down on my neck for a long time. I couldn't help but open my eyes and look at her. But my sister's expression was unexpectedly gentle. She looked at me and said, "Sister, let me touch you once more, I won't be able to touch you again in the future." I stared at my sister in shock and replied, "Don't worry, even if I become a ghost, I won't reincarnate. I will stay with you like we did when we were young." My sister shook her head and said, "No, I don't want you to become a ghost." She handed me a purse. I recognized it as the one my mother kept money in, hidden very securely. My sister had somehow found it. "Sister, take this and go to the big city, you said it would be nice there. Take my share and go there to see. Go and see that world we've never seen before, is it as beautiful as we've heard? And, don't come back." My sister hugged me one last time, then let go of my hand and walked away. I didn't know where she was going. All I knew was that she had left me with a hopeful future. I found my household registration and ID card, set this simple house on fire. Then, carrying my sister's hopeful dreams, I left that place. I walked slowly this time because I knew all the bad things that wanted to harm me or stop me from leaving had been taken care of by my sister. Chapter 29. The outside world was indeed as good as I had imagined. Although there were shadows, there were more places that could be touched by sunlight. Children here, both boys and girls, could go to school. They had parents who loved them. If something bad happened here, they could seek help from the police. People were no longer helpless. It was truly good. Unfortunately, my sister couldn't see it. Chapter 30. In the end, I broke my promise. She didn't want me to come back. But 10 years later, I still returned. I was lucky, bought a few houses outside, caught up with a demolition wave. Suddenly, I became a multimillionaire. I found a construction team and opened up the roads in our area. I wanted to open up those closed mountain villages. I wanted more people to leave here and see the outside world. I built a Hope Elementary School in every corner of our area. I wanted all girls to be able to go to school, to receive education, and to see the world outside. On the day the Hope Elementary School was completed, I lay in bed and heard my sister smiling at me in my dream, saying, "I'm really proud of you, sister. The outside world truly looks good. In the next life, remember to take me with you to see it. Because over the years, you've done so many good things for me, you've redeemed my sins. Sister, now I'm going to be reincarnated." In my dream, I nodded vigorously at her. "No problem, in the next life, remember to come find me, my dearest and most beloved sister."